Good morning, everybody. So I don't know how to queue up the slides. Let's try.
You go.
There we go. Okay. So as Foster mentioned, I've been studying social TV. So basically, over the past 2.5 years or so, I've been hyper-focused on trying to understand how social media interacts with TV and how TV interacts with social media. So how do the things that TV networks and advertisers put on the screen influence what we talk about on social media? And I've been studying this relationship from a wide variety of angles, and I'm going to tell you about a little piece of this, just one study, to give you sort of some idea about how we might be able to use social media to derive value for advertising. Just a show of hands, how many of you, so this is an advertising conference, I imagine a lot of you are working in this space, how many of you are trying to figure out whether there's any value in social media for your companies? Okay, a few of you, right? Almost all of you, maybe you're shy to raise your hand, right? So this is a big question that firms are facing. And I'm not going to give you all the answers. Like I said, I'm just going to focus on one study, but at least it'll give you a sense that maybe there's hope, that maybe we can actually use the fact that people are talking in public in large numbers. Maybe we could use some of that data to derive insights for our companies. So the story that I'm going to tell you today in sort of my 15 minutes of fame that I have is a story that what you say on Twitter says a lot about you, right? And it says a lot about you as an individual and as a group, right? So as you communicate online as part of groups. And this story basically is able to be told because of the fact that so many people are talking about their daily lives in public for free on social media. So because of that, I've been able to collect a lot of data that enables us to derive these values that we're trying to understand. So the way that I collect data for a lot of studies now is the following. So in the context of television, I start with a bunch of television handles, so Twitter handles. So this is about Twitter data in particular. So I start with Twitter handles. And for Twitter handles of television shows, I then go out and collect information on all of their followers. So I take a TV show, I get their followers on Twitter, and then for those followers, I can get their status updates, their historical status updates, as well as their social networks. So what this data enables us to do is to group people together, but more specifically for the purpose of my work, I can build all kinds of recommendation engines on this data and compare them. So I can build recommendation engines that are based on the tweets that people say. I can build social network-based prediction recommendation engines. And then just I can link companies through the networks that companies form on Twitter. So this data is fascinating because it allows me to build all of those recommendations. But in addition to that, I can actually test them against users. And why that's the case is because users on Twitter follow more than one thing. So I can give my recommendation engine one TV show, for example, that a person follows on Twitter, and I can ask whether I can predict everything else they follow on Twitter. So these data that are out there in public for free allow me to both build different types of recommendation engines as well as evaluate them against users without needing any company involvement, which is really exciting from a research perspective. So I'm going to focus on what we've done to build a text-based recommendation engine. And I'm not going to go into all of the details, but I'll sort of give you the high-level summary of what we've done. So I told you that we start with these Twitter handles, right? So in the case of a TV recommendation engine, we started with the Twitter handles of hundreds of television shows. And then we collected, for the followers of those TV shows, all of their tweets, okay? So we basically get a collection of tweets that represent a TV show, right? Or the follower base of a TV show. And what's important in our work is that we don't just focus on the tweets about the TV show, we take all of the tweets. So that means if somebody's talking about their birthday, we get it. If they're talking about school, we get it. Or if they're talking about the television show, we also get those tweets. So a collection of tweets represents a show, but it's the collection of tweets about the daily lives of these people that follow the show. So then for each show, we have a document, which basically is comprised of a bunch of words. And for each word, we give the word a score. And that score is a score that reflects how unique it is to the document itself. So words that show up frequently in the user base of a particular TV show that don't show up in other shows would be given a really high score. And words that show up across all TV shows for a particular document or show would be given a really low score. So this is a concept of a TF-IDF score. So each word for each document, right, the document of tweets that represents a particular show is given a score. And then we use these scores on the words to calculate the similarity between shows. So shows are similar when they have people that tweet or use the same words, okay? And it turns out that when we do this, construct these word vectors for shows and calculate the similarity between them, they work really well in a recommendation engine. And I don't have time to kind of show you the precision recall curves and all the performance measures, but you just have to trust me that just doing this really simple, dumb thing of collecting all the tweets and giving every single word a score and using it to calculate the similarity between shows works really, really well, okay? And we didn't believe it ourselves, right? So just doing this out the box, no smart, trying to understand what people are saying, just giving words scores works well. So everything else I'm going to tell you is sort of what we did to try to understand why this is working, okay? So shows are similar because their follower base are using the same words. So these are just words that are ranked by this TF-IDF score that I mentioned for these different shows. So you see for American Idol, the top words are idol, birthday, snugs, God, recap, finale, bullying. Solid Girls, which is a show about bridal, about wedding dresses, you get bridal, wedding, gown, bride, curvy, meditation, fortune, coziness, and respectable. Then on the other hand, for Beavis and Butthead, you get all of these curses, right? And so perhaps then these words that people are using are reflective of, you know, them talking about the TV shows, and that's bubbling up to the top. But we thought that there was something more to the story. So we tried our best to get rid of all of the words about TV shows by, you know, removing tweets about shows using the handles and the hashtags associated with them. And we wanted to see whether these words are actually reflecting the demographics of the user base. And it turns out that they do. So why our text-based approach works is really because all of these tweets about people's daily lives are basically giving us some insight into their daily lives. They're reflecting information about their interest, about their demographics, and maybe even other things. So how did we figure this out? So for those of you in advertising, you might be familiar with this screen. For others, perhaps you haven't seen it before. If you've ever tried to advertise on Facebook, you go to this screen which allows you to do segmented targeting. So you can basically pick a segment of the population on Facebook to target market to. So we used this interface and what it gives us back to estimate the demographics of different TV shows and brands. And so we do that in the following way. So this is the interface, and at the top, so hopefully you can see this. I can't see, right? So this we put in the voice, so a precise interest, right? So that number in the corner, 691,580, tells us that that's the number of people that follow The Voice, are from the United States, are men, and are between the age 13 to infinity, okay? So we could also just get all of the people, not just the men. So we can calculate for any demographic the proportion of people that belong to the demographic, okay? So we started off with gender, age, race. So Facebook only gives us Hispanic as a race, or not Hispanic, parent, and education level. So we tried to map these demographics to demographics that are commonly used in practice. Specifically, we tried to match them to demographics that are used by Nielsen. And so for each of these demographics then, using this interface, we can get the proportion of women that follow a TV show on Facebook, the proportion of men, the proportion of people that fall within a certain age category, and so on. Okay? And so then, once we had these proportions for each of the demographic categories, we linked them to the words in these documents that we created. Specifically, we linked them to the TF-IDF scores. So what does that look like? So in a table, we have a record or a row that corresponds to each television show and all of the words that show up. Okay, so for each word, the word has a score for that TV show, and maybe the word doesn't show up. Okay, and then we try to correlate these TF-IDF scores with the proportion of a particular demographic that follows the show. Okay, so this is our table, and what do we get? Well, if we look at the shows that have a really high number of female followers on Facebook, so there's a high proportion of female viewers or followers on Facebook, we get the following words. So the bigger the word, the more important it is. So women, or these people that follow these shows where there are a lot of women that follow it, use love, use amazing, use happy, use cute. On the other hand, men use game and zombie and league and comedy. So you have to ask yourself, does this make sense to you, right? Like if you think about what you tweet about, okay? So these words are just simply popping up because we've correlated the TF-IDF scores with these proportions. So we didn't just do this for gender. We did it for the age categories as well as parents and proportion college grads. And so in the parentheses, you see an R-squared value. So this is a measure of how well the TF-IDF score for the word correlates to this proportion. So you see that love is highly correlated with the proportion of female followers that follow a TV show. And then you see for men, you have game, league, and it wasn't until somebody in the audience once when I gave this talk who had children mentioned, I was trying to figure out, what are these words representing for people that are less than 17? And it turns out that a lot of them are words corresponding to a young pop male band, okay? So I was trying to figure this out. It took somebody in the audience. So these words are popping up and they're correlated. So this suggests that maybe, what people are saying is reflective of their demographics. And so we used demographics. We looked at geographic region and we get similar results where the words that pop up at the top make sense, right? And then Facebook, in addition to demographics, allow you also to target people based on their interest. And even for interest, when we rank these words, you get words that make sense, right? So for shows that have a lot of people that like cooking, you get preservative, crockery, at the top, restaurateur. With gardening, you get market puree. And I'm not tricking you, right? So these are the words that show up at the top, and it's fascinating, even though it's important to note that the R-squared values or the correlation coefficients are much smaller than when we're trying to link these words to gender, right? But still, the words that show up at the top make sense. So we can do multidimensional characteristics. So if we look at young females, we get love, direction, girl. As opposed to old females, we get hubby, recipe, service, healthy, right? And no matter how we slice the data for men, they still talk about games, whether they're young or old, okay? And so you can pick the demographic combinations that you want. So liberal females, conservative females, and so on, right? So when we do this over and over, the words actually make sense. So how might this actually be useful? Well, what happens if you don't know the population demographics of a particular group? Then perhaps you can use these words or the word frequencies to predict the proportions of a particular demographic of a group of people that tweet. And so we did that. So these are, again, R-squared values on holdout samples of data. So we basically built a model based on the top words associated with these different features. So the words that were associated with young females and old females and conservative males and liberal males. And what this is simply showing is that when we include the top words for conservative males, say, and try to predict conservative males, we do a much better job at predicting the proportions than when we use all of the words for males, okay? So these words really are reflective of the demographics of the people that are tweeting. Okay, so where's the value actually, right? So this is cute maybe for Twitter users of people that we know the proportions, but you don't have to start with a Twitter handle. Let's say, right, we start with the tweets from the people that tweeted about the Super Bowl ads. So for anybody that does research in the space of social TV, the Super Bowl is a sort of big deal for us, right? So we're collecting tweets like crazy. And so just Sunday, we collected these tweets. So how would this work? So we take the tweets and their user IDs, right? And then for those user IDs, we go out and get not just the tweets about Coke in this example, but we go out and get all of the tweets that they've made in the past and then see whether the frequencies of the words are correlated with the demographic frequencies that we found in general in all of our population. So does anybody want to guess what our model predicted for Coke, like the proportion of men? High, right? So 70% it was we predicted, right? On the other hand, we have the H&M ad, right? And the same thing, we can get the users, their historical tweets, and then create this bag of words and use them to basically assign a prediction based on our word model. Any guess for H&M? About 90% women, right? And so I mentioned gender just because that's one of the only features from Twitter that we actually have ground truth on, because we can match the names to figure out how many men and women we have tweeting. But so, it's not just for the Twitter handles. Whenever you have a population of people that you can get their social media posts, you can group them together and ask, for this group, what's the proportion of people that belong to a particular demographic category? Okay, so basically the message here then is for any subgroup of tweeters in this case, you can predict the demographics of those that group based on the words that they use. So simply, what you say on Twitter says a lot about you. Thank you.